Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today, today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books number 33, Onward. The first book today is Longshot by Timothy Toker, 2001. This is another children's book. The character Lori Bird Preston is 11 years old, and she moves with her father to his hometown to live with her grandmother. She struggles to make new friends. Her father coaches, and she stars on her school basketball team, which becomes state champions. So, wonderful book. Promotes sports for girls, which is one of my interests. One of the things I think it's good to enjoy sports, not to get into the whole competitive, gotta win. Actually, I don't like that at all, but just the joy of running around and playing a sport. The next book is Children of the River by Linda Crew, 1989. This is outstanding. It's the story of a Cambodian refugee named Sundara. I think she's a girl. She faces enormous challenge of living in America, culture shock. Of course, this is the immigrant experience. She and a white American, Jonathan, fall in love, but it is a forbidden love because of cultural differences. So, very interesting. The United States is a land of immigrants. So many people have moved here from different countries, and it's really good for us to understand what immigrants go through. The next book is Racing the Sun by Paul Pitts, 1988. This is a wonderful children's book, or a young people's book. The main character, Brandon, has a Navajo Indian background, but his father has adopted white ways. And the grandfather comes and teaches Brandon about the Navajo ways and to be proud of his heritage. It's a very interesting book, very touching. It also gets into culture clash. Of course, if you people in this country, in this case American Indians, you have to adapt. We all have to adapt to the world. But it is good to keep our culture, whatever it is. And this is very touching because the grandfather steps in because, it is good to adapt and learn the ways of mainstream America, but also to keep the old ways as well. And that's what very touching relationship between the grandfather and the grandson. The next book is Destiny's Darlings, a World Championship Little League team 20 years later by Martin Ralbowski, 1974. I really enjoyed this book. The author wrote about the Schenectady, New York Little League baseball team won the 1954 Little League World Series. In other words, they were the best. They won the championship for boys playing Little League baseball. I guess age 12, 13, 14. I don't know but kids. And anyway, the author tracked down the players 20 years later and wanted to talk to them about that experience. And most of them said it was work, that it wasn't fun, that the fun had been removed. So I wanted to give this to my son's Little League manager in the Philippines, Rolly Destinies, because I felt the same thing was going on there. This is a great danger in sports. Adults are good at taking away the fun in sports or education or whatever. And, I believe that sports should be enjoyable, and I think schools should be enjoyable as well. Next book is Young Fu of the Upper Yanks by Elizabeth Foreman Lewis, 1932. Very old book. Won the Newbery Award. It's a children's book. Our son Tim, his school, LaSalle Green Hills, used it. It's set in Chongqing, China in the 1920s. It's a good historical novel. Young Fu moves from the country to the big city of Chongqing with his mother. He becomes an apprentice of a coppersmith and has many adventures, and good fortune comes to him. So fine story about China back in the 1920s. The next book is Who is Cary by James Lincoln Collier and Christopher Collier, 1984. This is a tremendous book. Cary is a African-American woman slave in New York City in 1793, Wow, really goes back in time. And she sees George Washington, I guess ran into him, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton up close. And she finally learns her family name and who her parents were. So this is the life of an African-American slave. Very important topic. The next book is The Story of Junipero Serra, Brave Adventurer, by Florence Lyman White, 1987. This is the story of a Spanish Catholic priest who established missions in San Diego, San Francisco, California, late in the 1700s. And he was working with American Indians at that time. Of course, these Indians really all struggled with disease that they were not immune to. But you have to give credit to the people, these priests who tried to help them. And even if they didn't respect their religion, but they were humanitarians. He was a good guy. The next book is Maya Angelou, Journey of the Heart by Jane Pettit, 1996. This is another children's book about this very famous African-American woman who experienced many hardships, but she overcame and thrived, and she lived a very successful life. Maya Angelou is very famous. She's this. In fact, I saw her on television last night reading poetry. As a girl, despite her challenging circumstances, she became an extremely well-educated girl and person as she grew up. And then, I believe she became famous for her poetry. Very, very wonderful. And describing, she was on TV last night. She was reading a poem about a cleaning lady, and her life and how she was always smiling and laughing, even though there was a lot of pain in her. The next book is The 100-Penny Box by Sharon Bell Mathis, 1975. This is a short book. The main character is Michael. He's friends with his 100-year-old Aunt Doo and helps protect her 100-penny box from his mother, who wants to throw it away. So, nice relationship between this elderly woman and this boy. It's always nice. I remember my mother's mother I was close with. I think it's nice when, the generations that were actually if you skip a generation, this is what grandparents are all about, because they can teach about the old days and be maybe more fun in their old age, more kind and interesting. So, very, very wonderful book. The next book is 7 Kisses in a Row by Patricia McLaughlin, 1983. Another fine children's book. It's very short. It's about a little girl named Emma. Her parents go away, and Aunt Evelyn and Uncle Elliot come to stay with her and her brother Zachary. They have fun, and Emma teaches the adults many things. I think this is an important point, how the elderly can teach children a lot, and children can teach the elderly a lot. We all need each other. Different ages have different things that they can different gifts that they can give to each other. The next book is Marching to Freedom, the story of Martin Luther King Jr. by Joyce Milton, 1987. Another children's book, outstanding. Martin Luther King was a hero in American history and world history, fighting segregation. When African Americans were required to sit in different places and restaurants and wherever it was, they had the different public drinking fountains and on the buses they'd have to sit in the back and so forth. So and Martin Luther King fought against that in the 1950s, and for African Americans to have the right to vote in the United States. He died young at age 39. Tragically, he was shot and killed. But very brave man, did a lot of good, and a real hero in American history and world history. The next book is Alive and Kicking, When Soccer Moms Take the Field and Change Their Lives Forever, by Harvey Emmet, 2001. I think this is a book for adults. It's an outstanding book. It's a story of middle-aged women discovering the joy of sports, physical play, camaraderie with teammates. Because, years ago, girls, I think, in the U.S. didn't play sports as much. A lot more now, I believe. And so you have these women. Maybe they didn't play when they were girls, but then they're playing. They're enjoying their daughters playing and coaching them and playing as well. So the same thing, which I find very important, which is girls playing sports, for fun, for recreation, for good health, and healthy activity to run around. It's not good to sit all the time. The next book is Missing May by Cynthia Rylant, 1992. Same author as A Fine White Dust. In this story, Aunt May died, leaving Uncle Obe and their adopted daughter Summer missing her. Right. This is what happens when people die or go away. And then this character Cletus comes, and they finally learn to move forward, still missing May. This is part of life. We lose people, but the people who are still around, we still have people to love, and we can love and be loved by. So, and then we can still remember these people who have gone. We should remember them. The next book is The Captain Underpants Extra Crunchy Book of Fun. This is, I think, the first one. It's we talked about the other one before. I think that was the second one. This is by Dav Pilkey, 2001. Tremendous book, really, really wonderful. How to make your own comics, how to draw, lots of laughs, games and stories. So he tried to make this more of an interactive thing for children. This extra crunchy book of fun. The next book is Sometimes a Fantasy. Midlife Misadventures with Baseball Heroes by Jeff Ginn, 1994. Oh, I really enjoyed this. Now, this is a sports book. The author spent a week at a Chicago Cubs fantasy camp. Now, these fantasy camps, well, in this case, the guy obviously took a week's vacation, and he spent it with these former players for the Chicago Cubs. When he was growing up, these were probably his heroes. And he gets to be with them and coached by and play against. He played with players such as Randy Hundley, Ferguson Jenkins, I remember from the 70s, Jimmy Pearsall, crazy guy, Glenn Beckert, Jim Hickman, Joe Pepitone, Gene Oliver, and Jose Cardinal. So actually, when you join these fantasy camps, they have a mixture of former players and these old guys, just regular people, fans. So it's when the fans get to play with their heroes, and they play games. They work out. It's a wonderful thing. I did this a little bit for one day. I did this in Cleveland. The only player there was Bob Feller. The rest of them were just guys, regular guys. But we got out. We were able to go on the field and play and run around and have batting practice. It was a lot of fun. The next book is The Church's Amazing Story by the Team of Daughters of St. Paul, United States, 1970. I really enjoyed this book. It's the history of the Catholic Church from Jesus Christ to the present. And I read this to learn more about the lives of the saints, who I think are the greatest heroes in world history. Because this is what we need today. We need more saints to fight this negativity, which is so problematic and tragic. The next book is Pro Football's Hall of Fame by Arthur Daly, 1963. Oh, I love this book. This is tremendous. And, he talks, as you can see, it was published in 1963. This is before the Super Bowl. I saw when the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, they announced, some of the people congratulated them on, winning your first title, NFL title. It's not true. Not true. The 46 years of NFL history is being ignored now before the Super Bowls. And Philadelphia, I know, won at least one NFL championship. That was their last in 1960. And that was ignored. That was too bad. And so this book gets into this wonderful history of the NFL, going way, way back. Guys like Jim Thorpe, Red Grange, Bronco Nagurski, Don Hudson, Sammy Bow, Curly Lambeau, Pete Henry, Johnny Blood, and George Halas and Burt Bell. Of course, Jim Thorpe was the greatest athlete of all time. He played professional baseball, professional football, and he won Olympic gold medals in track and field in the 1912 Stockholm, Sweden Olympics. In one play in the NFL, he had a 90-yard kickoff run back for a touchdown, which was nullified by a penalty. So they had to re-kick. On the subsequent play, old Jim had a 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So he was, just imagine. Pete Henry, another fellow who's mentioned, was not only a great professional football player, but also became a fine Major League Baseball umpire. And Henry had the longest punt ever, a 94-yard punt in 1923. Wow. Red Grange, one of my favorite old-time players. In 1925, college football was very popular, but the NFL was not. And Red Grange was the best college football player of his time when he played for the University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois. He started there in 1922. Then he turned pro. He started playing for the Chicago Bears and made pro football much more popular because he inspired other great college players to become professional, and the NFL attendance boomed. So he had a dramatic effect on the NFL and helping the NFL become popular because it really wasn't. And one of the reasons I like Red Grange is my father used to say that his father, Doran Ray, he loved Red Grange. So that was one of his heroes. Whenever I hear about Red Grange, I think of my grandfather, my father's father. In 1930, when the Green Bay Packers won the NFL title, one of the Packers, Johnny Blood, got carried away celebrating on the train going back to Green Bay. He was snapping teammates with a wet towel. One guy got so mad he chased Blood to the back of the train. And so Johnny Blood proceeded to climb to the top of the train, walk on top to the front to elude that guy. What a story. Bronco Nagurski, another guy he's talked about, he was also a professional wrestler. Dutch Clark, he played in a game that his team won 3-2, an NFL game, and Clark scored all the points for both teams. He was tackled in the end zone for a safety and kicked a field goal. Just imagine, one guy scored all the points in a game. Another fellow, Ernie Nevers, played pro baseball, basketball, and pro football. In 1927, he gave up two of Babe Ruth's 60 home runs. And Dutch Clark made Detroit Lions football popular in Detroit. He was also a Cleveland Rams coach. Don Hudson, considered by some of the greatest receiver of all time. He caught the shortest touchdown pass ever, 4 inches. 1942 against the Cleveland Rams. Sammy Baugh was a tremendous Redskins quarterback. After several dirty sacks, I don't know what they did, but by this fellow, Sammy Baugh threw a pass right in the guy's face and knocked him out. This is before the face mask protected guys' faces. So that guy got what he deserved. So Sammy Baugh played in Washington from 1937 to 1952, and he made Redskins football popular. In his era, there was no passing when a team was backed up deep in its own territory. Teams on their own 10-yard line would punt on first down. So Sammy Baugh, the dominant player of his time. Joe Carr, NFL president from 1921 to 1939, long time. He organized pro football in 1904, the Columbus Panhandles, and he's considered the father of the NFL. Also another forgotten guy. Bert Bell, NFL commissioner from 1946 to 1959. In 1935, he invented the college draft. Before that, only the Giants, Redskins, Bears, and Packers won championships because they always got the best college players. And so the college draft gave a boost to the NFL because it brought balance and gave all teams a chance to improve and win. Tim Mara, another fellow mentioned, founded the New York Giants. George Preston Marshall, who founded the Washington Redskins. In one game, in 1940, the Redskins beat the Bears 7-3. And after the game, Marshall quipped, "The Bears are quitters." And that was a big mistake. The two teams played again in the championship game, and the Bears got revenge and won 73-0. They had lost 7-3 in a game and were mocked. Then they won the title game 73-0. Wow. Curly Lambeau, who founded the Green Bay Packers in 1919. And today the Packers are the only team in the NFL who play in a small town. population 63,000. Hard to believe stuff like that. Lambeau was a big high school football star in Green Bay, but in college he got sick and came home. Then he got a job working for the Indian Packing Company in Green Bay. This would be meat packing, packing, basically making canned meat or putting meat in cans. So anyway, Lambeau went to the owner of the company and asked him to pay for the uniforms. He organized a football team for the workers. This is how the Green Bay Packers got started. And they went to the owner of the company and asked him to pay for the uniforms, which he did. And Lambeau responded by saying he called the team the Packers. That's how the Green Bay Packers got started. And that year, the Green Bay Packers, players earned $16.75 for their first year of play. Then the author also talks about George Halas, who founded the Chicago Bears. He played 1 year in pro baseball with the New York Yankees and was left injured and left baseball. This is an incredible book, absolutely incredible, because of all this wonderful history of the NFL way back in the early days, which has been very much forgotten today because of this focus on the Super Bowl era. The next book is A Long Way from Chicago by Richard Peck, 1998. It's outstanding, a wonderful book. I read it out loud to our son Tim. It's the prequel to A Year Down Yonder. The summers of Mary Alice and her brother from 1929 to 1935 in a small town with the indefatigable Grandma Dowd. So wonderful, stories of small town America in the old days. The next book is Who's Bringing Them Up? How to Break the TV Habit by Martin Large, 1980. Wonderful. I was a victim of this. Television really hurt me a lot growing up. And this book explores how destructive television is for children's development. And so I've been a crusader against TV, and all these children who just vegetate, sitting in front of the TV. They're not maturing. They're not developing in any way, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's real tragic. And so this is a very important topic. The next book is Outside the Lines, African Americans and the Integration of the National Football League by Charles K. Ross, 1999. What a tremendous book. These very important players, African American players, like Charlie Paulus, Fritz Pollard, Paul Robeson, Joe Lillard, Kenny Washington, Jackie Robinson, Bill Willis, Marion Motley, and George Preston Marshall. He wasn't an African-American player. And so, according to this book, the story of African-American pro football players. Pro football actually started in 1892, not the NFL. In 1904, Charlie Paulus became the first black pro football player. He played for the Shelby, Ohio Athletic Club. Charlie's first pro football game was played in Marion, Ohio. Marion didn't like a black star and tried to hurt Paulus, but Shelby won that game 29-0. Fritz Pollard became the first black head coach in the NFL. With L.G. Tobin, he co-coached the Akron Pros from 1919 to 1921. And his Akron Pros won the first NFL title in 1920. So the first NFL championship was won with an African-American coach. Pollard was one of the highest paid players in the NFL in 1920. Paul Robeson joined the Akron Pros in 1921. And Robeson became famous as a singer, and he was a very talented fellow. With Pollard and Robeson, the Pros won 18 straight games from 1920 to 1921. Joe Lillard played pro football, basketball, and baseball. And then African-American players were banned from the NFL from 1934 to 1946, 13 years. At that time, Major League Baseball was all white as well. And some owners felt that the black players hurt the image of the NFL. They felt that black players attracted black fans, and white fans didn't like having black fans at the games. At least that was their rationale. Pro football was in trouble financially in 1934 because of the Depression. Black players had helped the NFL become more popular from 1920 to 1933, but they were cast aside. And so the NFL used black players, then dumped them George Preston Marshall was the leader in banning black players. And banning black players was considered good business. Very terrible. So from 1934 to 1936, there was black pro football outside the NFL. And so in other words, kind of like the Negro League baseball teams. The best team was the Harlem Brown Bombers. However, during the 1934 to 1946 era, there were black college players. Kenny Washington, one of the greatest college football players ever, and the best since Red Grange, playing for UCLA, threw the longest in-air pass ever. In-air pass, 72 yards. Wow. Washington was eligible for the NFL draft in 1939, but no team picked him. He's the best college player. The NFL wasn't interested in the best college player because he was black. Tragic. Jackie Robinson was a teammate of Washington's at UCLA. Robinson was the only player at UCLA ever to letter in 4 sports: track, baseball, basketball, and football. In 1940, he was the national long jump champion. He was the highest scorer on the basketball team. Baseball was his weakest sport. That's where he became famous. In football, he led the nation in rushing, averaging 12 yards a carry. Wow. The NFL was not interested in Jackie Robinson as well. After the Cleveland Rams won the 1945 NFL title, the team moved to Los Angeles, and that club became the first major pro sports team on the West Coast. California liberalism ended pro football segregation. In 1946, the LA Rams signed Kenny Washington, and he became the first black player in the NFL since Joe Lillard and Ray Kemp in 1933. The Rams needed Washington as a precondition to obtaining the LA Coliseum lease. Apparently people were against racism in California. The Rams also signed Woody Strode. The All-American Football Conference started in 1946. Cleveland was the only team to sign black players, Bill Willis and Marion Motley. In 1946, the biggest pro football crowds were home games for Los Angeles and Cleveland. The Browns had the biggest crowds in pro football, sometimes 71,000 plus. Willis and Motley played a lot for the Browns and helped the team win titles from 1946 to 1949. Motley led the pro football in rushing in 1946 with 8.2 yards per carry. The Browns' success from 1946 to 1950, winning 5 straight titles and leading pro football in attendance, proved that African American players were good for pro football. One aside, Eddie Klepp, a white guy, played 1 year in the Negro Leagues in baseball for the Cleveland Buckeyes in 1946. George Preston Marshall, owner of the Redskins, remained the last owner to sign black players. By the late 1950s, the Redskins were the whitest and worst team in the NFL. Up until 1960, the Houston Oilers had segregated seating. Despite a good record, black fans stayed away and attendance was way down. So this is wonderful history. Tremendous. So fascinating. The next book is Children at Play, Preparation for Life by Heidi Britz Creselius, 1972. Oh, this is a wonderful book. Outstanding. Book talks about how important traditional play is and how the world is in danger because of the loss of traditional play in favor of television, toys, computer games, city life, and school. And I have to say, for myself, we used to play in the Philippines touch tag, which is a wonderful, very, an ancient, probably children's game, very simple. But other games as well have kind of disappeared. Children used to, and these games that kids would play without actually any organization in neighborhoods really help kids physically and help them develop mentally, emotionally, socially. And this has really changed because traditional play is disappearing because other things have crowded it out. Aside from the fact that we've lost our neighborhoods because people have moved around so much and the neighbors don't know each other and lost the extended family. But this is an important thing. We can get it back, these wonderful games that can help children and actually are a lot of fun for adults who want to join. The next book is Julie by Jean Craighead George, 1994. This is the sequel to Julie of the Wolves. Julie, and so this is set in Alaska, and Julie is she's an Eskimo, and she loves her wolves, but she battles her beloved father Kapugan, who has vowed to kill the wolves, who threaten his musk oxen herd. And so this gets into the Indian way versus the white man's way. And Capoogin at the end returns to the Indian ways, releases the mux oxen who become wild, and then the caribou return, which actually didn't require any, really herding or feeding. But so wonderful. This Jean Craighead George is an outstanding, tremendous author. Really, really enjoyed her. So she really promotes nature and animals, the great outdoors, and so forth. Really like Jean Craighead George. So anyway, the next book is Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo, 2000. Beautiful book, set in a small town. This character, Opal, is a little girl. She has no mother, and her father is a preacher. Her preacher father is new in town, and she gets a new dog she names Winn-Dixie. Makes friends with young and old. So it's a very happy, pleasant story of this girl in a small town. So it appears we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I wish you well. Hope you find a good book to read, and have a good day.